My name is Anine van Deventer and I lead the laboratory capability domain at LTS Global and the strategic evolution of LabFine. Thank you for joining us today from around the world. We are delighted to have you with us for what I believe is an important conversation for laboratory decision makers and leaders responsible for laboratory transformation and operational excellence. Many of you know LabVine as a global platform that has connected laboratory professionals through educational programs, webinars, seasonal schools, and industry events over the past several years. As part of LabVine's evolution, our focus is increasingly on helping laboratories identify practical approaches to improve organizational performance and achieve meaningful outcomes from their transformation efforts. Today's webinar is a reflection of that focus. Across the laboratory industry, organizations continue to invest significant time, effort, and resources into improvement initiatives. New technologies are implemented, processes are redesigned, quality programs are strengthened, and transformation projects are launched with the goal of improving performance. Yet, despite these efforts, many organizations find themselves facing familiar challenges. Improvement initiatives fail to deliver the expected value. Results are difficult to sustain or measure. Teams find themselves revisiting the same problem months or even years later. The question is, why? What causes some improvement initiatives to create lasting value, while others struggle to achieve the intended outcomes? That is exactly the question we will explore today. Our webinar is titled, Why Your Last Improvement Project Failed and What You Missed. To help us unpack this topic, I'm delighted to introduce Fred Kloeren. Fred is Associate Director at LTS Global and has worked with laboratory organizations across a wide range of healthcare and laboratory environments to improve operational performance, support transformation initiatives, and help organizations achieve sustainable outcomes. Before I hand over to Fred, just a few housekeeping notes. Fred's presentation will be followed by a live Q&A session. Please submit your questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A function. We will also be running a live poll during the session and encourage everyone to participate. A recording of the webinar and supporting resources will be shared with registrants after the event. We would also love to know where you are all joining us from today, so please introduce yourselves in the chat. Thank you once again for being here. Fred, over to you.
Good morning or afternoon, depending where you are in the world, and welcome. My name is Fred Kloeren, and today we're going to have I hope, a very honest conversation. It may be slightly uncomfortable. It may even feel a little awkward at times. But my hope is that it will also be transformative. Because today we are tackling a question that keeps many laboratory managers awake at night. And that question is, why did your last improvement initiative fail? There will be a poll during this session where you can provide your answer. But why your last improvement initiative failed, there is something more importantly, and that is, what is the missing piece that transforms a one-off improvement project into a sustained championship level performance? And that is what we're here to explore today. So yeah, let's dive in. I think a lot of you have been through some form of a laboratory improvement project. You know the ones I'm referring to, right? The ones where the workshop room is booked, all the flip charts are coming out, and there are always those people that have bought an alarming quantity of those beautiful colored Post-it notes. People are standing around the wall, moving sticky notes from left to right, up and down, as if they are directing air traffic at Heathrow. For a brief moment, it feels like absolute magic. The bottlenecks have been identified. The waste have been exposed. The future is bright. Our laboratory is about to become lean. Maybe so lean that it starts disappearing completely. Anyway, everyone leaves the workshop energized. The team is excited. Management is excited. Actually, everybody is excited. And for a good few weeks, things actually improve. But then, 6 months later, you walk past that same wall. The Post-it notes are gone. The project champion has left. The improvement dashboard hasn't been updated. And somehow you're having exactly the same conversation that you were having before the project started. Same bottlenecks, same frustrations, same turnaround time issues, and same staffing challenges. Every morning you wake up and think, haven't we fixed this already? The problem is usually not that the team didn't work hard enough or that there was a lack of ideas. Most laboratories have enough improvement ideas to keep them busy for the next decade or so. The problem is that most improvement initiatives focus on changing processes, when the real challenge actually is sustaining the change. Those are two very different things. So today I'd like to explore a question is that why do so many improvement initiatives start with great enthusiasm? They deliver some early wins and then somehow they quietly seem to fade away. And more importantly, what separates the few improvements that stick from the many that don't? I will pause here to provide some time for you to complete the poll that is currently being activated. Okay, now we can move on. Okay, what we see is that when things start going wrong, we usually reach for the same explanations, or actually we should call them excuses. We need more training. We need more staff. We also would need a bigger budget. And of course, we can't ignore that new piece of technology that would make our life a lot easier. Because apparently every single project of problem in a lab can be solved with another software platform or another piece of technology. And then I think this is a personal favorite of mine. We just need someone to actually take ownership. I think that sounds reasonable until we realize what we really mean. And what we really mean is we need another hero. Every laboratory has one. And I think you know exactly who I'm talking about. The person who knows every workaround. That same person who gets called when the analyzer misbehaves. The person who is able to find a sample that appears to have vanished into another dimension. The person who somehow remembers why a process was changed 7 years ago on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. They are brilliant. They are committed. They are simply amazing. And if we are being honest, they're also slightly terrifying. Because nobody else knows how half of the place works. So when the performance drops, what happens is the hero stays late. When there's a backlog, the hero comes in on a Saturday. When something breaks, don't worry, our hero will fix it. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief, problem solved. Except it wasn't. Because if your solution depends on one person continually saving the day, you don't have a system. You got a hostage situation. And eventually, one of three things will happen. Very likely, the hero burns out, or if he's lucky, the hero can go on leave. But worst of all, what happens if the hero gets promoted? Suddenly, nobody knows the workarounds. Nobody knows the shortcuts. Nobody knows why things are done the way they are. So, if your operation depends on one person continually saving the day, you don't have a system. You have a hero. And unfortunately, heroes are not a sustainable operating model. So, the uncomfortable truth is that we actually weren't solving the problem. We were simply admiring the person holding the problem together. What does that mean? That means that sustainable improvement doesn't happen when one person becomes stronger. It happens when the system itself becomes stronger. Additional to that, there's also something what I like to call the automation trap, because a lot of people think that is the solution to everything. If we just automate this, all our problems will disappear. And I think that you already know how that story is going to end, right? Automation doesn't fix broken processes. It accelerates them. It makes good systems faster and bad systems fail faster. Yet, we seem to spend millions optimizing the analytical phase, faster analyzers, smarter software, and even more automation. Meanwhile, the majority of the laboratory errors occur before the sample even reaches the analyzer. And most report delays happen after the result is produced. It's almost like you buy a Formula One car and then discover that the road is full of potholes. You're not fixing the problem, you're simply getting to the problem faster. So what's the real problem? It's not a lack of effort or a lack of smart people. It's a lack of a system that creates predictable performance. We have been trying to fix symptoms with individual solutions when what we actually need is a systemic overhaul. The moment we who made the mistake and start asking a different question. What in our system allowed that mistake to happen? When you do this, everything changes. We have spent years trying to improve performance. One person, one process, and one project at a time. Predictable performance doesn't come from heroic efforts. It comes from a system that is designed to ultimately deliver just this. And this brings us to what I like to call the capability gap. The capability gap is the elephant in the laboratory. It's the gap between what your organization can consistently deliver and what it can only deliver when the stars are aligned and the right people are on duty. This is the difference between performance by design and performance by heroics. Capability isn't training. Capability is the ability to produce the desired outcome day after day, shift after shift, regardless of who's working or who's on leave or what unexpected crisis just walked through the door. If your performance depends on exceptional people doing exceptional things every single day, then that's not capability. That's hope. So what is the shift we need to make? We need to stop thinking about improvement as a project and start thinking about it as a capability. We need to move from training events to performance systems. We need to move from fixing problems to actually preventing them. We need to move from relying on individual expertise to building organizational capability. Because the goal isn't to create a few exceptional people. The goal should be to create an exceptional system. A system that delivers the right outcome day after day, regardless of who's on shift. Maybe a heroic effort can win the day, but only capability can win the year. The laboratories that consistently outperform their peers aren't the ones with the most heroes. They are the ones with the strongest systems in place. So I hope we now understand the capability gap. Now the next question is, what does it look like when a laboratory starts to close it? This all starts with what I like to call seeing differently. Most laboratories, they see symptoms. There is a turnaround time problem. We have a staffing problem. There's a quality problem. Naturally, they all try to fix the symptom. On the other hand, you got the high performance laboratories. They look deeper. They ask a different question. They ask, what is causing the symptom? Because beneath every turnaround time issue, quality issue, or productivity issue, there's usually something else. That can be a workflow constraint, a handover failure, a decision bottlenecks, poorly designed workflow, and so forth. The biggest opportunities are rarely where the pain is felt. They are usually hidden where the system itself is struggling. And that's where real transformation begins. Let me give you a few examples. A laboratory is struggling with the morning turnaround time in chemistry department. The immediate conclusion, we are understaffed, we need more people. But when we dig deeper, we discover something interesting. The problem isn't staffing. It's a specimen arrival surge creating a 90-minute bottleneck every single morning. The solution is not adding more people, it is adjusting the collection schedules. The result then can be that you reduce your turnaround time by 30% without requiring any additional staff. Here's another example, excessive recollections. The assumption that the problem is caused by training. The reality, what we see is that there are 3 different collection procedures being used across different sites. So the solution here is actually standardizing the workflow, which ultimately then will result in fewer recollection and more consistent performance. Maybe one more, low analyzer utilization. The assumption automatically is we need to increase the volume. The reality actually is that samples are sitting in queues waiting for decisions. The solution here is to redesign the validation process, which ultimately then will result in higher throughput without adding any equipment. So if you're looking at those examples, I hope that you see that there is a pattern here. The pattern here is that the symptom wasn't the problem, the system was. When you fix a system, performance will improve naturally. And I think that this brings us to perhaps the most important lesson of all. The laboratory industry does not have an information problem. We are drowning in information. We know what lean is. We know what quality is. We know what KPIs are. And on top of that, most of us have attended enough webinars, workshops, and training courses to last a lifetime. And yet, many of the same problems keep showing up. Why? Because knowledge is not capability. Knowing what lean is doesn't improve the flow. Knowing what quality is doesn't create quality. Attending training does not change performance by itself. What changes performance is applying that knowledge consistently, day after day, through systems that make success repeatable. So the goal is to know, is not to know more. The goal is to do better, but do it consistently better. And that's exactly why LabFind 2.0 is evolving from a learning platform into a capability building platform. So what's the payoff? When capability increases, everything shifts. Problems are identified earlier, our decisions are better, confidence soars, and implementation is simply faster. You will experience less firefighting and more sustainable improvements. You will get a greater return on your technology investment and a better overall workforce utilization. The goal isn't to build a laboratory that performs well when everything goes right. The goal is to create a laboratory that performs well even when things go wrong. That's exactly what capability delivers. Many of you joining today are laboratory managers, laboratory directors. And I think for you, there is an important distinction. Capability is not a training investment. It's a performance investment. Why? Because capability determines how your laboratory performs when the pressure is on. It influences quality. It influences productivity. It influences workforce effectiveness. And it influences the return you get from your technology investments. Ultimately, it influences your overall financial performance. The reality is that every strategic objective eventually becomes an operational challenge. And capability is what determines whether that challenge is successfully overcome or not. That is exactly why the most successful laboratories don't invest in capability because they want better training. They invest in capability because they want better business outcomes. And that's exactly why the LTI methodology and the impact framework are designed around capability development rather than simply improvement projects. Every football fan loves a star striker, very relevant currently with the World Cup going on. The player who scores the spectacular goals, the player who wins the occasional match almost single-handedly. However, championships are rarely won by one player only. They are won by teams. Behind every great striker is a solid defense. There's a disciplined midfield. There's a coach with a strategy, and there is a system that allows the team to perform to the best of their abilities and consistently. If you take away that system, even the world's best striker will struggle. Laboratories are no different. We all value expertise. We all value experience. But sustainable performance doesn't come from a handful of exceptional individuals. It comes from a system that enables ordinary people to consistently achieve extraordinary results. Championships aren't won because you have the best player. They are won because you have the best system. And the same is true in laboratories. So where does LabFine fit into all of this? I hope that if we have learned anything today, it's that sustainable improvement isn't about finding more heroes. It's about building stronger systems. That's why LabFine is evolving beyond a traditional learning platform. Because knowledge alone is no longer enough. The laboratory industry doesn't need more information. It needs more capability. The capability to identify problems earlier, the capability to improve performance consistently, and the capability to sustain improvements long after the project team has left and the first project has been completed. And that's the role that we see for LabFine, not simply as a place to learn, but as a platform to help laboratories build the operational capability required to achieve predictable performance. Because the goal isn't to win a single improvement project. The goal is to build laboratories that keeps improving long after the initial project is completed. So where do we go from here? This isn't the end of the conversation. It is the beginning of a different type of conversation. Because after everything we've discussed today, perhaps the most important question isn't what improvement projects should we do next? There's a different question, and that question is which capabilities are we currently missing that prevent us from consistently achieving the outcomes that we want? That's a very different conversation. That's a conversation about capability. That's a conversation about systems. It is a conversation around sustainability. And it starts by asking some very simple questions. Which performance improvements keep disappearing? Where are the recurring bottlenecks? Where does work spend most of its time waiting? Where are potential decisions being delayed? Which critical knowledge within our organization exists in only one or two people's heads? Which improvement initiative succeeded? Which one failed? And more importantly, why? The objective isn't to identify another project. The objective is to identify the capabilities required to consistently deliver the performance that you want. So the next time that performance drops inside your laboratory, don't ask who needs more training. Don't ask who made the mistake. And please, don't ask who's going to save us. This time, ask a different question. And that question is, what capability is our system currently missing? Thank you very much. Let's open the floor. What are the challenges that you are facing? What part of the capability gap resonates most with your day-to-day reality? Let's have a candid conversation about building truly resilient laboratory operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. I think our audience will now look at their operations and their improvement projects a little differently. Perhaps we can first start with the poll question. We had 40 people there that said they achieved the improvement, but the results were not sustained. And 45% said they reverted to old ways. Perhaps you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think that is typically what we are seeing, right? I mean, achieving certain results and improvement is good, but maintaining that, I mean, often historically what we see, we can be very successful. But then if people revert back to the old ways of working 2 months later, from how we are currently working, we consider that a failed project. And that is where sustainability comes in, making sure that there's a skill transfer, the capability is built during the project, and try to avoid that, projects will start regressing again and so forth. Make sure that people understand what do we need to do to maintain this and build from there onwards. That is the ultimate goal.
Thank you. There is a question from Anu. Her question is about automation. The business case is built on idealized performance and return on investment. In addition, reduction in repetitive manual tasks, reduction in FTE based on smoothly running automation platforms. However, the reality is starkly different. Automation breaks down and staff are busy fixing engineering problems, handling exceptions, or validating the platform. Her question is, how would you guide the C-suite and lab leaders to design more informed business cases on operational reality and decisions on automation implementation?
Yeah, I think that is a lot, and I think it's a very good question because ultimately it's a national progression in terms of what I highlighted here. So I think initially, if we basically this presentation was about understanding that we need to create capability, but that on itself um, is not enough. So maybe if I walk practically in terms of the process that we typically follow, and I think that will answer a majority of the questions. So when we do projects, we use a capability development framework. If we start the project, then we typically start with an organizational readiness assessment because if your organization is not ready for transformation, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Organizational readiness assessment, what is it typically that we do? We make sure that the leadership is aligned, that the organization is ready for change, making sure that the resources have the capabilities and also the capacity within the organization. Make sure that the governance structure is in place because a lot of laboratories are not set up to do large, for example, large transformation project as such, right? So that is the first step to make sure that everybody understand from the executive, from the C-suite all the way to the bench, what are we trying to do and how are we going to go about it and what are the gaps that we need to fill before we can start. So that is the first step. Then the second step is start looking at what is our capability strategy. We need to understand, based on the organizational readiness assessment, what are the capabilities that are missing, um, what should be developed first, and who should own what. So again, that is more from a governance perspective, high level understanding where we're going. And then we're building the right team, making sure within your organization, you got the right team that have the capabilities and also the capacity, because the reality in laboratories as well, people have their day job, which is ultimately working on getting quality test outcomes as such, and those kind of projects are a small portion of what they need to do. That is not necessarily the best approach. You need to have besides capability, you also need to have the capacity to do that. So you need to establish an improvement team that has the capability as well as the capacity next to their day job, which means doing the testing and keep the laboratory operational. So if you're talking then about developing the skills, which skills are missing, and so forth and so forth. And then the coaching and implementation phase. Very important. What do we need to do to get people up to speed and so forth? Then again, from a governance perspective, a lot of the laboratories, they are not set up to have a project management office to do those kind of large laboratory projects. What do you need to do to make sure that you can effectively manage those kind of projects? The same token, you need to understand, create a steering committee. You need to get a clear understanding what are the KPIs that we're going to look at, what are the escalation pathways, and how are we going to make decisions throughout the organization to actually keep on moving forward. And that also then brings us to the performance management, and this will touch on some of the aspects that you currently are highlighting, right? You need to make sure that we identify certain KPIs. How are we going to track those? What is the financial impact as such, and so forth. So we need to keep a finger on the pulse. So we need to make sure that that performance framework is in place and it's operational, because otherwise we don't know, are we doing the right things? Are we moving forward? Are we achieving what we set out to achieve? So I think that is also very important from a practical perspective when you do those type of projects. And then you need to start looking at what I like to call a continuous intelligence, getting a very clear understanding. There's a lot of data in the lab, but data is not necessarily insights. We're currently developing AI solutions that helps you actually translate that data into insights, which helps a lot in terms of making sure that we're achieving what we set out to achieve and that we can monitor our performance throughout it. And then from a sustainability perspective, when we do those kind of projects with the laboratories, we work side by side from the beginning all the way to the end. If we're making certain assumptions, if we set certain targets, that is not the targets that we are setting, that is the targets that we're jointly setting. So I think that is also a very, very important aspect, and that is part of the bigger picture to run those kind of projects and ultimately create the capacity and the capability within the organization. And to that point, yes, you're going to run in all kinds of technical issues, whether that is the utilization of instrumentation, challenges with instrumentation, and so forth. These are the kind of typical problems that you will solve within a project. And again, then the key goal is that you don't fall back, that you not only addressing the symptoms, but you actually look at the root causes and solve those and make sure that everybody is aware that these processes were, for example, the problem here, what caused all the symptoms that you're seeing and so forth. I know that this is a relatively high level answer, but it was a question that touches on a lot. I hope I address some of the points that were raised in that question.
Yeah, I think in terms of automation, it's important to do a very extensive approach where you don't look at things in isolation, but in an integrated approach, and have the proper risk management measures in place.
Yes, because if you're just looking at a technology project, and takes for example LIMS as an example. Not that long ago, we spoke to a laboratory that gone through 3 failed LIMS implementation projects, right? One that was an off-the-shelf solution, and the one that was a fully customized solution, and they all failed. And the reason then is like they came to us, why? Then the question should be, is your organization ready to transform? Are they ready to roll out the new LIMS system within the organizations? And then the methodology and the steps that I went through earlier will determine, that your organization is ready, that your processes are ready, get a real understanding. What are the challenges within your laboratory, within the different phases? And then ultimately that tell you, are you ready for automation? Because automation is not solving all the problems. If your processes are weak, it will basically highlight that, it will magnify those kind of problems. So yeah, I mean, that is absolutely correct.
Then there's a question on how do you ensure sustainable capability development, and what differentiates LTI from a normal training program? Fred, I'm first going to leave it to you to answer on the sustainable capability development, and then perhaps I can add in terms of what the LTI entails. But I would also like to add that in the resources that we add in this session, it will also be available after the event. When the recordings become available, you can you can use your link that you're joining the meeting with now to access the recordings afterwards, and the resources will remain available as well. But there is also some information, documents loaded on the LTI program, but I will elaborate once Fred has given his input.
Yeah, so from a capability building perspective, there's the capability in terms of, building the capabilities and so forth. That is the LTI program. But if you're looking at it more holistically, that can be much broader than just basically, providing the people with the skills and the understanding of how lab transformation work and the entire ecosystem. I mean, we have been speaking to a laboratory that went to was a large laboratory group that went to a significant transformation project, but there was no, for example, operational improvement department within their organization, right? So then the question is, are they able to actually start, assuming that the decision was made, do we need an operational improvement team, yes or no? That decision was made, yes, we need to have a project management organization and a continuous improvement team within our organization because it's necessary. Then the next step is, okay, where do you get these people from? It's a laboratory environment. They're not familiar with that. So if you're then looking from a capability perspective, Lab Fine and the capability building can basically making sure that you help with the recruitment of those people and so forth. Also, how many people do I need? So it is really the capability building as we currently offering that can become a complete end-to-end solution. So that is not solely looking at providing the people with the capabilities can include the recruitment, the setting up of the monitoring systems, the performance frameworks putting in place. It's literally an end-to-end solution to provide that capability as a whole within an organization, if that makes sense.
Yes. From my side, the LTI program, what I would say mostly differentiates it from normal training program. It helps the delegates that's on the program to understand their role in the business and how they can contribute to the performance of the business. It helps them look at available data within the organization and be able to identify areas for improvement. It helps them to monitor that. It helps them to identify solutions for those opportunities for improvement and to build the business case to influence the stakeholders and to implement the project. And I think in this program, what's wonderful about the program is it starts off with an intensive 1 week classroom format workshop, basically. And then at the end of that workshop, the delegates are able to identify the opportunities within the organization and start implementing performance improvement projects. And they do that immediately, and they also have the support, coaching and support for 12 months and to monitor and help them to make sure that they actually achieve their objectives and be able to also document that in a case study. And that makes it possible for them to also scale it and implement it in other areas of the organization. So we are now coming to the end of our session. So Fred, I want to thank you for your time and also invite everybody that would like to have a one-on-one conversation with Fred on discovering the opportunities in their organizations. So there is a link also in the resources where you can connect with Fred. And then also follow us on LinkedIn, because we will now be having a monthly webinar on the 4th Thursday of every month. And we will be telling you via LinkedIn on the upcoming topics that we will cover. And the focus is all about providing useful tips, tools, and guidance for sustainability in the laboratory. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Bye.